60 years, which is a quarter of the history of the American judicial system, more than a quarter of history. But at that point, I'd been a lawyer for about a decade. And I saw Oswald being paraded, and I heard him say, "I'm a patsy. If the truth comes out, it will show I did nothing at all. I'm being framed, etc." And I thought, if this guy walked into my office and said that to me, because a lot of my clients say they're innocent when they're not, but I have to take it at face value. Ask him, well, where were you? Who were your alibi witnesses? Give me facts about where you were. Let's see if we can develop this case as a defense. Because before Oswald could talk to anyone, he was murdered in the basement of the Dallas police courts building. There, murdered while being surrounded by FBI agents, Dallas police officers, Secret Service. They murdered him before he could tell us a word about what his defense would be. I thought that he was entitled to a defense, even after his death. I thought that the American people were entitled to the truth. And so I began my inquiry. Of course, I couldn't talk to the most important part of the evidence, that is Lee Harvey Oswald, to ask him where he was. And to check out the alibis, I had to start with the dead client, in essence, which makes it exponentially more difficult, but not impossible, especially since in this case, there was no, let me repeat that so it's clear, there was no evidence linking Lee Harvey Oswald to the assassination of President Kennedy. No evidence, and no evidence in all these years has ever come forward. What they said is that Lee Harvey Oswald was in Mexico City, where he met with the Cubans at their embassy and the Soviet Union at their embassy. And so this was, it was not true. The man who ran the CIA for the United States of America was David Atlee Phillips, and he ran it from his office in Mexico City. Mexico City is better than America for him because no inquiring reporters or photographers, no local laws that he could not violate without paying a few bucks. And so the head of the CIA for America and the rest of the Western Hemisphere was David Phillips, and he was in Mexico City. Not long ago, I was at a forum. This is now half a century later, almost. I was at a forum with David Atlee Phillips, and someone asked him a question. And the apologist for the Warren Commission said, yes, Mark, and David Atlee Phillips said, we never had any evidence that Oswald was in Mexico City. The whole case was based on that. We never had that evidence. And so apologists for the Warren Commission said, yeah, after Mark Lane cross-examined him in a skillful way, Phillips made that statement. Fact is, I was on the panel. I heard him make the statement. I didn't cross-examine him. I didn't ask him any questions. And what happened? His answer was a response to a student whose name I didn't know then and don't even know now. He stepped and said, only, not even in an accusatory way, Mr. Phillips, tell us about Mexico City. That's all he said. And Phillips said, when the truth comes out, when it finally comes out, there was no evidence that Oswald was ever in Mexico City. And this was the guy who ran the CIA for this hemisphere from Mexico City, and the whole case was built upon the fact that Oswald was in Mexico City. Why do they want to say Oswald was there when he wasn't? Well, first of all, they said he was there in September of 1963. Those were documents by the CIA. And he was, at that point, we were told later, planning the assassination. That's why he went to the Mexico City, to the Cuban embassy, see if he could get a flight to Cuba, then to the Soviet Union embassy, so he could go from Cuba to Moscow to be free. The fact is, he was never in Mexico City, and David Phillips admits that now. But what was the point of saying that It was to terrify anyone who looked into the Kennedy assassination. Because the first thing Earl Warren said when he was asked, when will the truth ever come out? This is the chairman of the Warren Commission, appointed by President Johnson. Was really the Johnson Commission, but they called it the Warren Commission. He was the Chief Justice. He was appointed to look into the facts. And here we have Warren raising this issue about Oswald and saying, if the truth ever comes out, hundreds of thousands of Americans might die. That was published in all the newspapers at the time. What did he mean? It would start World War III, because it would show that Oswald was in Mexico City, meeting with the Russians, meeting with the Cubans in September, came back and killed the president 2 months later. Except that Oswald was not there. But someone was. The CIA in September of 1963, and this is the most crucial information in the entire case. In September 1963, the CIA was setting up Oswald as the assassin, the lone assassin in a crime which had not taken place and would not take place for 2 months. How did the CIA know Kennedy would be killed 2 months later? Because they planned it, and they did it.
How did you embark upon the path of going to Dallas? Because you started, if I'm not mistaken, you started researching the case and starting the process of writing what would become Rush to Judgment before the end of the year in 1963. So
well, I started in 1964, but and the film came out in '66. I wrote. It was the book and the film Rush to Judgment, and the book which we're doing simultaneously. Because what I did is I found the witnesses, the eyewitnesses to each of the relevant events, the surviving witnesses to each of the relevant events, and filmed them. And the transcripts of what they said played a large part in the book Rush to Judgment, and actually comprise the whole film, Rush to Judgment. And I was blessed in doing this with a really wonderful documentary filmmaker, Emil D'Antonio, and who I didn't know. I knew about his work. And he called me one day and said, I'd like to talk to you about a film. I said, a film about what? And he said, about the Kennedy assassination. And so we met and spent a great deal of time talking about this, mostly in a bar, actually, where we had Irish coffee. I think we broke the record for the amount of Irish coffee we drank the first day we met. But D, we called him, was actually great. And he played a major part in the film. And therefore, since the film interviews, which I conducted the interviews, but D set them up and did up the lights and stuff like that. And I found the witnesses and interviewed them. And those transcripts basically played a large part in the whole film, Rush to Judgment, but they also played a large part in the book, Rush to Judgment, which I'd never written a book before. And I did a manuscript turned down by every publisher in America. I think there were 16 of them, I'm not even sure there's more. And they all rejected it. They read it, and said, exciting, do it, and then 3 weeks later, 4 weeks later, 2 weeks later, each one said, sorry, we can't do it. Well, after we brought the actions many, many years later under the Freedom of Information Act, which didn't even exist at that point, but existed shortly thereafter, it was the only thing that came out of the Kennedy assassination, which was good, was a Freedom of Information Act saying we're entitled to documents. And we got these documents, and based upon those documents, we learned a great deal about what had happened that day in Dallas. And D'Antonio saw me on a television show, called and said, I'd like to do a film. And so the interviews I did, and which I set up, which he filmed, became became sorry, there was a little glitch here. We have glitches even today, even with our medical care program. So expect at least that here. And so we had D'Antonio was filming this. That became the film Rush to Judgment, because he called me and said, "I'd like to work with you." And I said, "Great." We met. I said we had a few drinks at an Irish bar on the west side of Manhattan. Doesn't exist anymore. My memory's still about it though. And I wrote the book, Dee did the film. The book, the first book I ever wrote, which had been in manuscript form, been turned down by every publisher in America. So I finally went to England and found The Bodley Head in London, 100 years old, very conservative firm. And instead of checking with the CIA or the FBI about whether we should publish this book, they sent it to Professor Hugh Trevor Roper, who was the Oxford professor. Regis professor means he was appointed by the Crown at Oxford University. And he read it for a publisher I'd gone to, Holt, Reinhardt, and Winston. And instead of going to the CIA or the FBI, they decided there was someone who was interested, and so did the English. And the Bodley had asked him what he thought of it. He was also given a book by Gerald Ford called Portrait of the Assassin. Ford was a member of the Warren Commission. And Professor Trevor Roper wrote back, and when he was asked, he said, well, Gerald Ford's book is sort of a children's version of the Warren Commission. And he said to me later, what I didn't add, but I should have, I thought at the time, I thought it'd be a disrespect. I was going to say, if you decide to publish it, you should send a box of crayons along with it. He didn't say that to them. He said, Mark Lane's book will be a classic the day it is published, and I would be honored if I could write the introduction. Which is a bit of a problem for me, because he was a worldwide authority on these matters. He had written a leading book on the last days of Hitler. And the other person who said he would do the introduction was Lord Bertrand Russell. And my publisher, I said, can they both do it, one to forward, one to an after it? And my publisher said, no, Bertrand Russell's nose being left. Well, yeah, he was not, he was a humanitarian. I guess you can call that left. But, and so they said, we will publish it with Hugh Trevor Roper's introduction. And I still have the Bertrand Russell introduction, which I prefer. Trevor Roper was great, and I'm not criticizing him, but I thought maybe an afterward by Bertrand Russell would be terrific, but I didn't control the publishing industry. That's what the British did. And then when every publisher in America turned it down, Arthur Cohn of Holt, Reinhardt, and Winston talked with the British and said, we'd like to publish that in America. So Rush to Judgment, the first book I ever wrote, could not be published in America by an American publisher until the British publisher, the Bodley Head, a conservative old firm, decided to publish it. And it was then published in the United States by Holt, Reinhardt, and Winston, but first accepted in another country after having been rejected by every publisher in the United States. So that's the problem, which is sort of ongoing. That's why I raise it now. It's ongoing. We don't get all the facts. So it's, it's so much better now than it was half a century ago. We have the internet. That's changed the world, and it's changed our ability to get information. But we still want to offer us some suggestions which are not popular with the power structure. Still problems today.
Well, let me bring Bob in. Bob, how did you get involved in Rush to Judgment?
It was a total fluke. I was studying music at the Conservatory of Music in San Francisco. I had just started getting interested in cinematography. My roommate at the conservatory, Richard Stark, by the way, are you getting audio?
Yep, sounds good.
I know
So,
Richard, you know,
what?
I know Richard Stark.
Yes. Richard got, yeah, Richard got involved with Emil and yourself. By the way, you look great. You had blacker hair the last time I saw you 50 years ago. And anyway, so he called me and he said, "You want to get involved in a documentary?" And I said, "Sure, hell, I wanted to shoot anything." I was very green and just getting started out. So we had this incredible adventure. I don't mind saying it was a little scary. The police knew we were there. We knew that things were not totally truthful. Every time a car backfired in Dealey Square, I don't know about anybody else. I hit the ground. I'm sure there were, I imagine there were shots being fired, and it was a real eye opener. I consider myself pretty left, but I really was not. I didn't have any reason to be suspicious of what the government was saying in those days. But after witness, and I heard the questions being asked them, and typically they'd say, "Where were the shots fired from?" And they'd point, like right there, to the book depository building. And they would say, "How do you know that?" "Well, the Warren Commission proved it." "Where do you think the shots were fired from?" "Oh, over there by the grassy knoll." And when you see that over and over again from all these different points of view, and from ordinary people that, you were there when they knocked on the door, there couldn't be any, they weren't fake witnesses or anything. It just absolutely convinced me that we were getting the truth, and that there were a lot of people that didn't want us to do that. So it helped radicalize me. I can't say I knew a lot about it, or I went into it for altruistic reasons, but I sure learned a lot.
Yeah, it's good to meet you for the first time now. Hi.
Hi. It's been a few years, Mark. Yes.
I'm sorry?
It has been a few years. Yes. It was last century.
Literally. Well, I don't know about you, but I think we like to watch your movie, gentlemen. Before we get going, are there any quick questions that you members of the audience would like to ask? Okay. Well,
I got one, Randy.
yeah.
If you could do it again, is there anything left out of the original you'd like to put in now?
Did you hear that question, Mark?
Who's it to?
This is a member of the audience, Mr. Ira David Wood III. Let me take 1 second to like to recognize a couple people in the audience. So Mark Lane was one of the very first average Joe to really look into the assassination. But there have been researchers, people from all different walks of life, who have just taken it upon themselves to ask questions and to do a little digging themselves. And here in the Triangle, we're lucky enough, fortunate to have two individuals who've done some made some wonderful contributions to revealing this history. And we have two of them sitting right here. Ira David Wood III, the famous actor. If you've ever seen Scrooge in Christmas Carol here in the Triangle, then this is the man right here. And the founder of the theater in the park in Raleigh. As well as Grover Proctor, historian and mathematician and lifelong academic. He, I don't know if anyone saw an article I wrote last year about the Raleigh call, but that appeared in the Indy. But Grover Proctor had done the lion's share of research on that, and he's the one who actually coined the term the Raleigh Call. And we can get into that after the film if you're interested. But Mr. Wood asked if there was anything that you would change, Mark, or anything that you would have added or would have done differently with the film?
Is there anything that would work?
That
Change about my position?
that you would have done differently?
I'm sorry. Excuse me one minute. I need to change about my...
The film.
The film. Well, the film speaks for itself. It wasn't what I said, it's what the witnesses said. And we asked the witnesses what they saw, what they heard, and they presented their views. And I think they did it heroically. S.M. Holland, railroad supervisor, was up on the overpass, and he told me he had been a Dallas deputy sheriff before then, but he was up there, and he had been warned not to talk to me. I was coming to town, and he was warned not to talk to me. And I said, yet here you are, we're in your house, you're being filmed. He said, well, sir, when you can see your president, whether you supported him or not, the election, you see your president have his head blown off right in front of your eyes, and you don't have the courage to tell the American people the truth about that event, then I say, let's give this country back to the Indians if they'll have it. And so that was really an encouraging thing to see people have been threatened, yet came forward because they thought this was so important that the American people learn from the witnesses. And it's really inspiring to me. So many witnesses, so courageous.
Bob, what was the next film you worked on, and did you shoot any other films that were quite as interesting?
Oh, wow. I don't think I've shot anything as that's had the continuing interest that Rush to Judgment did. We did a documentary on a spiritual healer in Peru. It was pretty revealing and nice, but it never. I don't think it was as important. It's interesting. This was my first time out. I wasn't very much of a cinematographer, but my career is more shooting dramatic films, and I try to shoot good quality stuff, of course. But no, I just unfortunately was not able to stay in this kind of area of documentaries where you're really going in and doing stuff as significant as this. So the answer is kind of no,
Well, perhaps you two could collaborate on Rush to Judgment 2.
Oh, I'm ready. I'm ready
too. Let's talk.
All right.
Well, gentlemen, thank you very much.
Randy?
Yes. One question.
Here.
Oh, sorry.
If you look up in the Internet Movie Database under Rush to Judgment, it not only lists the 67 film, the classic, but it lists Mr. Lane as producer of a film called A Rush to Judgment that is supposedly still now in post-production. Does that really exist?
Did you hear that? So, in the Internet Movie Database,
About A Rush to Judgment, the new one.
I'm sorry, what's the question?
it was about A Rush to Judgment, another film that's listed.
Well, it's basically the same thing with some additions.
Oh, and so that's what you're doing now.
Yeah, that's out already. Yes.
Mark, not many people probably know about the trial in Miami in 1985. That was the basis of your book, Plausible Denial. Do you think could plausible denial be made into a film?
The question was about your book, Plausible Denial, and if you've ever considered making that into a film.
Well, Emmy's got a suggestion. I'm open to suggestions. It's my film. It's my book. I think it would be a useful film.
Well, I think you have a director of photography, so.
Amazon. You can reach me, markman.com. Okay. Good talk with you.
Gentlemen, thank you very much. And I'll be in touch.
Cool.
Okay.